I'm GD Kimball here for the Chain Film Festival with Dexter Henry, director of Sideline Stories, Sports Voices Matter.
Hey, good to see you.
Absolutely. You too. I was watching this film and I was thinking, the history of civil rights in this country has always been tied to black athletes. Jack Johnson becomes champion. Jesse Owens embarrasses Hitler. Tommy Smith and John Carlos in '68 in the Olympics. Muhammad Ali reinvents himself. So what is it about the black athlete that speaks to the movement in a way that actors don't, musicians don't, not even politicians? There's something about the black athlete that really, really has the power to move it forward. What do you think that is?
So I think one of the things is there's sort of this narrative around sports, right, in which that sports brings everyone together. And I think it's particularly at this time, and when I was working on this piece was, all right, well, if you're sort of together in this, are people going to be together for this movement? And I think black athletes have always had to challenge that, sort of as you mentioned, GD, right, throughout the course of history, whether it was, Jackie Robinson breaking the color barrier in baseball, right? These were these events, baseball games that brought people together, but we then said, hey, black people can't play in this sport. This has been done throughout. So I think black players in particular, always having been othered, or there being this history of them being othered in sports, have always known that, hey, that narrative might not necessarily be true. It isn't really bringing people together in the way that we may think, and we have to speak out against it because we have to live in this world where we still, even when we're not an athlete or just a regular person on the street, male or female, we still experience racism. We still experience systemic racism. We still experience lack of opportunities. And so maybe in the sports world, it's time to question we're not as together as we might think they are. And I think black people in particular and other people of color throughout in sports have definitely been challenging that for such a long time. And I think that it's not shocking that at this time, this is why we're still seeing this through this Black Lives Matter movement.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So also, how do you think that also translates into the historical and systemic oppression of the black body? How does that, do you think that translates into the world of sports as a tool to move forward?
Yeah, you absolutely can't ignore that, right? Because at some point when sports were integrated in different times for different sports in this country, then became, all right, we let them in now, right? And we were just sort of looked at as this commodity to serve the viewing public. And you talk about the black being sort of commodified in that way, that these players are just there to serve us playing on the field or on the court. And I think what players today are really trying to challenge is, I am more than that. You see LeBron James's campaign with more than an athlete. That has been done. And that's really the message behind this, is that outside of this, for some of these black athletes, I'm a black man or a black woman. I am a father. I am a, son. I am this. I'm just a human like anybody else. And I think you bring up a great point with that question, right? There has been this lack of humanization towards black athletes, in particular black athletes. Mm-hmm. And I think what we're seeing right now at this time is this sort of fighting back for that humanity, and really challenging those who have the power, those who have been part of systemic racism, to say, hey, what's your role in this? How are you treating these players? Do you really value these athletes? Do you value their voices? And that question is still yet to be answered. We still have a lot more to go. We've seen people put up, as I talked about in my piece, we've seen people show, Black Lives Matter signs and put out statements. But a lot of these leagues and owners still haven't put their money where their mouth is, and that's still yet to be seen. We'll see a lot of that in the future.
Right, and that's exactly leads into my next question is, since you made the film, sports has resumed. We've the NBA has wrapped up their season. The NFL is back up. College football, and all of them in some way have had a statement. We see with the end zone. There's decorations in the end zone. Everyone's wearing patches. There's shows of unity before the game, that kind of thing. Do you believe that there's actual substantive change happening? You were saying that it remains to be seen. What actually starts to change in a real way. But right now, are you seeing that change, happening day to day? Do you believe in the shows we're seeing from organizations?
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. Believe in the shows. No, because they're just shows right now, right? Like, and I'm not saying that messaging doesn't matter,
Mm-hmm.
and it does to some degree, but at some point we have to wonder if that then becomes performative, right? When is this actually behind action? And I think one of the things that was eye-opening to me, GD, when I was looking at sports, even as they continued to play and some returned, was especially before this recent election, presidential election. You have owners who were saying, "Hey, we stand with our players and Black Lives Matter," but they supported the guy who was, 45. They were supporting him, and I really don't believe personally that you could support his policies or the things that he said, and then in the same breath say you care about Black Lives Matter, because if you did, you wouldn't be supporting those policies and the rhetoric and stuff that he has put out. So I think that's where it's problematic, and I wonder going in the future. I think, from journalists and film creators and all that stuff, is, are we going to hold some of these owners accountable? You can't tell people what to do with their money, but there is something to be said about, hey, you're saying this, but your money's going here, and that might not be consistent with the message.
Yeah, 70%. Yeah, for all the shows and messaging, 70% of NFL owners send their money the other direction. And so, I think you hit something very important there. So let's I'll throw one more question at you. Directly from that last response. We had an election. In theory, we are potentially headed in some different directions from here on out. So, two-parter. What do you think should happen with regard to sports and the responsibility to the movement? And what do you think will happen with sports and the responsibility to the movement?
That's a really good question. Well, I think what should happen is what I think is needed is, what should happen is, you should have the people who have benefited from systemic racism, most notably white people in this country, the ones who've held the power, need to and be allies and amplify the voices of these athletes that are speaking out, and not just athletes. Amplify the voices of Black people and people of color who are speaking out in this country, the people who are doing a lot of the grassroots work. Find out how you can educate yourself, get involved. I think I would like to see that happen. That's what should happen, GD. What will happen? I like to be an optimist, but sometimes I can be a little cynical and sometimes worry about things. And I worry that people are going to get comfortable as we move further away from what we saw this summer and what we've been dealing with in this country with the pandemic, and may revert back to being like, oh, okay, that time just passed. The thing that encourages me, though, GD, is that I don't think that for athletes, they're going to forget about this time, especially the younger ones that are coming in. I think they're going to have learned about their social responsibility and what they could do. So I am sort of encouraged that they will continue that fight. It's a long way to go. There is still going to be more of a fight, because I think some people are going to get back and get comfortable. But I do feel like the younger generation is going to say, nah, we can't have that happen again. And that's a good thing. And I just hope that younger athletes and people of, no matter what their profession is in this country, and the world continue to have that fight.
Absolutely. Great. So thank you for sitting down. Dexter Henry, Sideline Stories, Sports Voices Matter. I love it. Hope we see more. So congratulations and take care.
Thank you, man. Appreciate you.
You too, brother. And I'm here with producer Michael Francis, director and writer Alessio Summerfield, and actor On Marion from Are You All Right? Hi, guys. How are you doing?
Doing good. I'm doing good. How about yourself?
Good. I was reading that this piece started is one thing and then morphed and evolved into something else. And I was curious, Alessio, how much of that happened during the process, and what was that process exactly?
Yeah, so I think it was strange. The film very much so started as a very angry movie. As a matter of fact, the title was completely different. It was called Hate instead of Are You All Right? And it was almost just like this screenwriting vessel for like a lot of anger, like workplace anger, work-life balance anger. And On and I had actually been talking probably about 2 years after the script got written, which still would have been 2 years before we shot it. And it was kind of through conversations with On and myself, conversations with friends, a good friend of mine, Alice Chang, a lot of just discussions that sort of centered around like, what if the film wasn't so aggressive and antagonistic towards the characters, and instead was sort of more sympathetic, and painted this picture and ended with just a quick gut check, so to speak. And I think years after the writing had started, my own anger had kind of started to temper. And when I noticed that I was less angry, I then started to ask myself, like, how can I channel these emotions into something that might make an impact?
Great. And it's so interesting, sort of a discussion of mental health with a focus on the workplace and this pressure cooker that we developed in this country of what the American workplace is, and the expectations on us, and all the pressure and the specificity of that I thought was really, really interesting. So also On, as a man of color, to bring yourself into that aesthetic of talking about this pressure in the workplace, especially in this point in American history. What was that experience like to sort of bring yourself into that as well?
Besides being an actor, I work a 9 to 5 as well. And as an African American that's in the workforce, especially in the blue collar workforce, it can be extremely stressful. So it's just like pulling those emotions from working a job that I dislike, but I know this is the thing that I have to do in order to put food on the table, and working this job in this blue collar America as an African American man, an amount of stress and depression and anger that I tend to fall in these types of categories. Which, for instance, I mean, when I did the role, it just automatically, I guess you put me at my 9 to 5, put me in my work. All of those emotions just came throughout my body for me to feel that mentally as well as physically.
Right. And so then the evolution of that, like, so you found that stuff creeping into your actual life as well?
Yeah, for sure.
Wow, that's amazing. And I'm interested, when we have producers to talk to also. So Michael, as a guy with sort of an eye on everything, on the the giant globe of this piece, what, from the outside looking in, and then also from the inside looking out, what was your experience of seeing this story unfolding and watching the process and the pieces?
Well, it's really important from everything you guys already talked on, what was going on in the space of the country, what's happening in the space of being a Black man in America, what's happening in the space of workplace anxiety, depression, and things of that nature, and how in the African American community, we don't often talk about or deal with these topics, especially publicly, if at all, even privately. So being able to dig into that in a meaningful way, and On really bringing the emotion of what that really looks like and being vulnerable to let that out. And with On and Alessio really digging into their personal space of what they feel like in places, which is a thing of commoncy, something they had in common, was really powerful. So as a producer, being able to just watch how they kind of created and crafted the creativity of bringing everything together, the writing, the way they wanted to tell the story, and all of that, it makes my job easy of just making sure all the pieces that they need fall into place and things happen the way that they need to happen so they can make the great art that they made. And, when I say this, when I say, he went there physically and mentally, if performance on screen, it's even more dramatic and I'll say impressive to watch, and a lot of stuff to, because my man, when he goes in, he goes in. And, that was just my job as a producer of just making stuff happen and putting things together. And then where we made messes, I just cleaned it up.
Right. And it's great, that also in the film we get this great sense of the toll that this sort of breakdown takes on the people around somebody. It's not just about that person. That we had we see that a wonderful relationship on screen, which is also points up to the rareness of seeing a Black romantic relationship of substance on screen, and that was also a really great thing. And us recognizing that the toll that these sort of fissures in our wellness have in the world around us. And with that, Alessio, would there have been more? Because I kept thinking like that relationship, that's a movie in and of itself, and so I really loved the work you did in seeing the care between these two characters. So, in playing that and in directing that, Alessio, how did you feel about watching not just this man unraveling, but watching a relationship also becoming this casualty of this as well?
Yeah, I can speak to a fun tidbit. The fun tidbit being that the relationship aspect entered into the mix really late in the game, but we knew that there was humanity missing from the screenplay. I think it was all work, all intense stress, and essentially it was this really heated, palpable anger and paranoia from 0 to 100 for the entire film. And so An and I were having all these discussions about it's missing something. And then one of our other producers, actually Benjamin Dewhurst, really early on in the process had said you need to introduce something into the mix. And I had kept saying, no, I don't want to. I don't want to overcomplicate it. But I'm so glad that we did, because Ashley Santana, who plays the role of Dawn, did a phenomenal job.
Yes.
And at this point, I'll kick it over to An to answer the rest of the question.
Yes. Ashley, if you're seeing this, big ups to you. You did a phenomenal job. The co-star for me. Adding that relationship, it showed a softer side, almost like what Alicia said, towards Walter's character. It was strictly, like you said before, the original title of the film was hate. So that's all it was anger, madness, depression. But in the midst of all of that, as human beings, we always try to find love. Love is everything. No matter if it's with a friendship, a relationship, or even a pet. When you're going through that mental stage in your life, that love from that particular individual, it always helps you out in some type of way to reevaluate, no matter if it's to a better person. And what he essentially wanted to be, Walter, was a better person. Walter, he wanted to be a person that can find that work-life balance, but also incorporate love. But in life, sometimes we let that work over consume us. And that's what actually happened to him before he lost it. Right on.
To add to that, the one, Ashley, yes, she is phenomenal. It was we need to get her on screen more. But to have that dynamic of the love, of the tenderness and those things, it made Wallace more three-dimensional, where he wasn't just this one thing. He was, you could see that in everybody. There's nobody's all bad, nobody's all good. There are variances of those things, and to have that on one side really brings out the raw emotion.
Right. Yeah. Right. So I'll throw one last question to you, and so in 2 or 3 words, what's the answer when we see our neighbors, our friends, our colleagues starting to slip into that universe? What do you think is the answer? What do we do, Alessio?
Ask them if they're all right. I don't know. It's an easy one, but
right.
But yeah, I've had a lot of conversations since the film has kind of been screened with super small groups of people that were helping on the film and stuff about like how strong those 3 words at the end, how strong they are, how much it matters. And I think, I mean, and we even at the end of the film have a quote that says like, hey, if you're going through issues, here's some 1-800 numbers to call, that kind of stuff. But like nothing is quite the same as like a loved one legitimately reaching out, or even somebody you don't know legitimately reaching out and asking, are you all right? And so I think, I don't know, I think there's a lot of power in just those 3 simple words.
Right. It's a good answer. It's hard to top.
Got to keep it on brand.
You have a thought on that?
Yeah, I mean, Alicio took mine. I was about to say, "Oh, you all right?" Oh man, you should have gave me first. No, but for real, I would have to say, love yourself.
Right on. Great.
Love yourself.
And Michael, you get the final word. How do we help them?
We have to seek help.
Mm.
We have to seek help. We have to be open to help. And that's the hard part sometimes.
Right on. All right. The film is Are You All Right? Alessia Summerfield, Michael Francis, An Marion. Lovely work and congratulations. Thank you, guys. And I'm here with Tosca Davis and Cedric Smith, the producers, directors of To Be Us, To Work. How are you guys doing?
I am well.
Doing
Thank
great.
You for asking.
Doing well.
Great.
Thank you.
Great. So this film comes to us from To Be Us Productions. Tell us a little bit about To Be Us.
Okay, well, To Be Us Productions is a company where we strive to elevate, Black voices. I think we may have had our goal was to make sure that Black people are centered in filmmaking and storytelling. And our production company was created because we engaged and attended many of Black conferences or Black meetings or Black spaces where the goal was to, talk about the issues in our community and how we can resolve them. And many times the culprit would not be named in the meeting. And that is the belief of white supremacy. And so we want to address that. And we want to make sure that we create the production company and our first film addresses this. We want to make sure that we gave space to Black people to tell their stories about this traumatic event of living in a world or existing in a world of whiteness.
Right. And how did all of you meet each other?
Well, it was probably, I've known Tosca 15 years now. And yes. I was on the Sickle Cell Anemia Board. I was a board member of this organization, Sickle Cell Anemia Gulf Coast of Houston. And Tosca happened to be one of the people that was working at the facility, working for the organization, I should say. And being a new board member, I didn't know all the logistics of it, and so she was very helpful in me understanding all the nuances of being a board member, the education that goes along with that. And what spawned out of that was a friendship. It's a funny story. I was at the time co-writing a book, and she asked me, said, well, why are you getting off work so late? And I said, well, I do the writing at work, after work. I do it on the computer at work. And she goes, why are you working on the computer at work? And I said, because I don't have a computer at home. And she goes, you don't have a computer at home? You what are you doing? And I said, well, I don't know. I don't have one. I'm sorry. And so she said, you need to have a computer at home. You don't need to be staying after work doing that. And so she said, look, I'll come and set up your computer for me. Just give me the money, give me a budget. I'll set it up for you. And then our friendship kind of went from there. She set up my computer and my life has been changed ever since.
Right. Well, in reading all of your bios, I see that you all come from such diverse backgrounds in terms of training and experiences. And in the film, there's a great deal of as a Black man, there's a great deal of catharsis in hearing these stories and seeing people saying things and giving voice to things that is like yes, exactly. I felt that, but have never been able to quite articulate that thing. So for all of you, I just wonder if you could talk a little bit about the therapeutic approach of coming into these films and it's not just about storytelling, but you're also affecting change. And so if you could both just talk a little bit about that process.
Absolutely. It was therapeutic for me. And especially, of course, the persons who were telling their stories. It was very important for us to make sure that the people who were telling their stories were looking back at Black folks. We make sure that the entire crew was Black. We filmed at a historically Black theater. We made sure that they were heard. We made sure that they had time to tell their stories. We didn't know what their stories were going to be. We did not hear them beforehand. And so we were definitely surprised of the narrations that came out of their mouths. Like we felt, and we know that sometimes many times the stories were the first time being told by storytellers that never told anybody before. It was definitely, one of the reasons we made this film is because of a Working Wild Black story that I had. And so that this definitely, and this happened before the Great Awakening of the US, where people were calling out Karens and filming people. I never got an opportunity to do that when I worked at my job, which was Planned Parenthood Gulf Coast. I always tell people and I always let people know the organization and the person, because that's part of the healing process. Before this Great Awakening, we were not able to say these things out loud. So Larissa Lindsay at Planned Parenthood Gulf Coast was a very violent coworker, and she made it very difficult to continue working at Planned Parenthood Gulf Coast. So to make a film like this and to be able to call her out and call out the organization, and to allow our storytellers to do the same, many of them had no problem naming the organizations or the companies. And we asked them, did they want us to take out the information? And they said no. That is healing. We are no longer going to allow people to hide and allow them to get away with being racist and violent. So it was very, very healing for so many of them, including myself.
Right on. Great. So I'm gonna pose one last question to you both in two parts.
Okay.
So, you talk about the Great Awakening, and so much has happened since you've made the film. So much has happened in this country. So I'll say, Cedric, based on everything that's happened, including an election where we have, maybe something will change, maybe we don't know. Where do you think we are right now with regard to the issues that you raise in this film and the issues that are being echoed throughout the country? Where do you think we stand right in this moment?
There's a very good question. And I have to start by saying, first of all, you have a president of the United States currently that's in office that did away with diversity and inclusion training from a governmental standpoint in regard to funding and so forth. So that's a big component, one would say, in that the intention of diversity and inclusion training was to break away those biases and so forth to make a more equitable workplace. At 2BS Productions, we do believe that diversity and inclusion training was somewhat of a joke. And when I say it's a joke, it was not completely going in on the issue that needed to be covered. When you have a group of people in a room, in a workforce, who are of varying backgrounds, the elephant in the room is that the Black people in the room sit in the most vulnerable position. And the reason is because we had chattel slavery in the United States of America. There's a different pathway of which we came here. And typically that is not discussed in these types of sessions. We come to them with this like, well, you have a bias and your bias is equitable this way, Black person, and your bias is equitable this way, Asian person, and your bias is equitable white person. And that's not the case. until we remove the scab, until we remove the and get down to the wound of things, that to me is not going to result in the equitable change that we need. So where are we in the country right now? Sure, there is an awakening per se, but I have my reservations in that regard. I'm fearful that there's going to be awakening fatigue, just like there's pandemic fatigue, and it won't be 8 months. We're already seeing a little bit of that now, where people are kind of like, oh, come on, you know, the Black Lives Matter stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, aren't we over that? Because you're not the one that had to deal with it since birth, like we have. You're not the one that's had to deal with it on various levels. So, you know, I'm minimally hopeful, but I think films like ours that are going to be impetuous, and that you don't have to keep telling your story over and over, Kimball. You don't have to tell your story 10 times over. You have a film that people can go to and say, go look at this. Believe me, I'm in there somewhere. And I believe all Black folks can, like you said, it may not be the exact thing that happened to you, but there's a universality to it that we all can grab onto.
Right. So Tosca, I ask you part 2 of that question. Now, where do you think we will go? What's the next thing?
Oh my God. I'm gonna answer this in a very spiritual way. Okay, audience. I think that the U.S. is about to feel a great reckoning. I believe. I don't believe we've seen the worst yet. I believe that Donald Trump has created a cult and a following that we will have to deal with for a generation. I think that the chickens have come home to roost for the United States of America. You cannot have done all of this to other countries, including the bloodshed on this land. The land remembers. The indigenous people remember. The people you brought over here remember. The U.S. will not see, daylight for years, I don't think. So I think there would be a great reckoning for the United States of America. I know that sounds negative, but you have to pay for what you've done.
Right. This sobering. That's sobering. But I
just like our film.
Yeah, I think exactly. I think you're on the money, and the film is great. Congratulations to you both.
Oh, thank you.
An important film, and it's something that not just us, but everyone should see. So, Tosca Davis, Cedric Smith, producers, directors, to be us, to work as the film. Thank you for sitting down with me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. Good night.
Have a good night.